Kid by the Side of the Road by SAVIN. We've all been bystanders watching events go by, not understanding their true meaning. Continued on page 20. When Noah was saved on the ark, what was the point? The Bible says Noah was perfect at a time when all the earth was filled with violence. In order to save the children of Adam so that God could continue to bless them as promised, God destroyed the whole earth except for Noah and his family. But but was Noah a perfect person? No. He too made all sorts of mistakes. He was just another sinner. But how can the Bible say he was perfect? You have to read the rest of Genesis 6:9. Noah was perfect in his generations. He was a descendant of Adam and Eve without other commingled blood. But that doesn't mean the rest, who may have some amount of Cain blood, are unredeemable because Christ was sacrificed on the cross. His blood is able to save us from all sin. That act cancels out our sin debt, including the Cain line. Noah was perfect in his generations. He was a direct descendant of Adam and Eve without other commingled blood. But that doesn't mean the rest, who may have some amount of Cain blood, are unredeemable. Because Christ was sacrificed on the cross, his blood is able to save us from all sin. That act cancels out our sin debt, including the Cain line blood, which it neutralizes and removes. So, humans born in that condition are still able to be saved from the consequences of that blood. Christ's sacrifice was a blood sacrifice. And like Noah, some out there in the world are still pure blooded. Back to Adam, a high percent of whom are probably Jewish. But my point is this: corruption and evil on the planet are present everywhere today, including the major world religions like Catholicism and Judaism, as well the Protestant Church and every other religion and cult in the world. Evil is not exclusive to only some areas of our society. Earlier, I mentioned that the captain of the Titanic was Jesuit and that the banker families are controlled by them. In fact, much of this present fight we're in is being manipulated by Jesuits. Again, instead of a classic military invasion, it's been an infiltration. When we take a look at the majority majority of nation state spy organizations around the world today, we can see that at their root, many came from the Jesuit order inside the Catholic Church and royal families. Jesuits have always been able to infiltrate governments and their deep state controllers around the world are continuously coordinating their actions. England's MI5 and MI6, our FBI and CIA, coordinated behind the scenes in this type of Spectre operation, like the James Bond movie series of the same name. Their efforts, working together worldwide, control governments, politics, institutions, and us. Perhaps the greatest single crime of the last century was the sinking of the Titanic, which paved the way for the centralization of the American economy and tax system, eventually leading to a world marred by a series of economically motivated wars. Back then, most everyone thought it was an accident, but there were some who complained and blew the whistle on that planned accident. Of course, they were poo pooed because people's normalcy bias and the false news narrative of that day, like today, would not allow them to believe otherwise. People felt that murder on that scale can't happen. So those with information to the contrary, or just skeptics, were blown off as the conspiracy theorists of their day. Still, it was a planned massacre and carried out successfully as their greatest heist, gaining the labors and energy of the American people, along with the rest of the world who use US dollars, which have become the reserve currency for our planet. In these past few months, we have had the CO Video 19 shutdown that some have complained about being too hard and long. And they haven't really understood why it's been happening. Well, you are watching an extremely important and epic reversal. We are in this flip or boomerang moment. It's a biblical Haman type point in time, like when the Jewish people were saved from a planned surprise destruction at Haman's hands. That evil guy ended up being executed on the same petard or device he had built as part of his attempt to genocide all Jews. Sound familiar? And that time is now celebrated each year by the Jewish people as Purim. You can find my telling of that important history online at some video sharing platforms. SAVIN. Just as the evil Haman ended up hoisted on his own petard, today too we have been flipping our situation. We're taking control of the way our country functions as well as other corrupt systems out into the rest of the world, including the US dollar reserve monetary system. In the midst of this CO Video 19 crisis and the riots, we are grabbing back the controls, retaking the helm of our nation as we shut out and close down these various players. For those who haven't seen the progress or didn't know what to look for, what was Dr. F. Fauci, a longtime globalist and head of the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases? What was he doing around the president during all those CO video press conferences? FG is just another player on the other side who decided to flash his secret little hand signs like the two fingers up for the satanic Baphomet and his Freemason hidden hand. And his Freemason hidden hand. FG gave his hand signals both in and out of the news conferences. What do you think was going on there? This corona beer virus has been just another plot. It was a plan. What are these numbers that keep coming up like 311 and 113? Dates they target to deliver parts of their plans? Tom Hanks announced he had the virus on 311, March 11th, 2020. What's the relevance? Numbers like 311, 113, and 33 are inside signals. They are secret handshakes for the bank job they're pulling off. What were they planning for the last year on 113? November 3rd, 2019. They were going to take out Seattle with a nuclear bomb while portraying it as having come from a North Korean sub. That setup had been in play for decades. Fortunately, it was nixed at the beginning of this president's administration. We have had protection over this country that most people can't begin to comprehend. And what was the plan before that? You might remember February of last year. 2019, when those helicopters landed at night in the middle of Wilshire Boulevard in Los Angeles. Our military operators rushed into the Guatemalan Cultural Center in the successful effort to protect us by removing chemical, biological, and radiological weapons stored there to be used against the American people. They planned on kicking off this sort of widespread sickness and disease scheme last year. They planned on kicking off this sort of widespread sickness and disease scheme last year. And what about their ortolan bird ceremony at the Golden Globes in January of last year, 2019? It was their ritual about the sacrifice of innocence because and what about the ortolan bird ceremony at the Golden Globes in January of last year, 2019? It was their ritual about the sacrifice of innocence because they had designs to pull off their pandemic that same year. However, while their plan A was getting kicked in the butt, we've also been curtailing the flow of drugs coming into our country from China. We're quickly gaining control of what drugs are able to make it into the US. We are systematically pushing back, disarming, and decapitating these globalists who have had it in for America. Intending to take us down, part of the strategy with that was the cause of this huge pandemic or plandemic. With that tool, they mean to walk us into their chaos, allowing them to become our masters again. Like the Titanic, their desire is for us to sink to the bottom of the ocean. Another Atlantis buried beneath the sea, and who would step in during the aftermath to fill the void with America gone? Who has been set up for it and would be available to lead the world? Well, it wouldn't have been China, and it's not Russia. It would be the greatest empire on the planet that is still to this day the the competition we've been engaged with in battle after battle for the entirety of our existence as a nation. The bankers. It's those monarchist bloodlines from across Europe and based in the city of London, which is the city within a city known as the square mile. They have had it in for us from the beginning. Let's see. And even now, who was it that orchestrated the phony dossier about a Russian hoax involving our president? It was another special delivery from the bankers. And even now, who was it that orchestrated the phony dossier about a Russian hoax involving our president? It was another special delivery from the bankers, which they presented to us through their complicit, bought off media. And that information was wrapped in the pretty packaging of endorsements from all the usual suspects: the noble Cambridge University and its esteemed foreign policy scholar, Stephen Halper, the head of the British intelligence MI6, Sir Richard Dearlove, our highest ranked people in the CIA, including John Brennan and all those benevolent FBI leaders who innocently traveled to England to consult on that falsified and treasonous report instigated by current and former British intelligence officers at MI6, along with Stephen Halper, an Australian operative, Alexander Downer. The advance of the dossier was then facilitated by the Democratic National Committee, DNC, Hillary Clinton's campaign for president, and the globalist law firm, Perkins Coie, as well as being assisted in the U.S. Senate by Senator John McCain and his cohorts. All these puppets that have been put at the highest levels to take out President T, even as early as when he was just candidate T. And the other threat he posed was as a businessman who is not in their club. They saw him as a threat from the very beginning, including the risk to their religious city, Washington, D.C. Do you know that it's not just a political city? Come on, man. It's their D.C. church. That is just as religious as the Vatican. Washington, D.C. was set up as a Masonic religious site. I don't have time to flesh this out here. But for those seeking advanced knowledge, look at John D., who was the original James Bond and is currently recognized by his symbol made up of two balls and a cane. 007. Two balls and a cane, 007. His 4-3 DC, symbolic riddles are his great secret. Let's go back. I don't have time to flesh this out here, but for those seeking advanced knowledge, look at John D., who is the original James Bond and is currently recognized by his symbol made up of two balls and a cane, 007. His 4-3 DC, symbolic riddles are his great secret. The mystery of the triangle in the square. But the triangle is actually correctly seen as a tetrahedron, having 4 sides. As part of that shrine, where did we get the White House and how was it given that name? I don't know. The White House was a plantation settled by the White family 50 years before being handed over to the American people as our new capital. The original capital in what was then Washington City was burned by the British in 1812. But the White House is, but the White's house, the White's house, the White's house. At the center of their plantation, the White House was not so named for its color. Instead, it refers to that White family who were Jesuits. So, their religion was considered all throughout the construction, orientation, planning, and maneuvering. And why did Washington, D.C. have to be placed in an area where they had to fill a swamp? A place that has become known as Foggy Bottom. For the Masons, this spot was exactly the right longitude and latitude for all of their spells, rituals, and wizardry to work well, including the Washington Monument as one great big timepiece. Where the shadow of the Washington Monument falls very often determines which agency of our federal government will have a news conference, press release of some other event set to occur at the exact moment desired. Or they will look for the right shadow cast by the moon. Across that whole area, DC is a giant timepiece laid out as part of their religion, an ongoing religious operation. Here's an example of their wizarding ways. You may remember Obama performing 2 oaths of office the first time he became president. The pretext was that he supposedly didn't say it correctly the first time, having used the wrong word. This gave them the opportunity to reset his oath in the White House with a well crafted and innocent looking scene that involved a certain portrait on the wall beside Obama, his hand on the Bible, Quran, or whatever, and on an important window. You see, the painting is of the architect for Washington, D.C., and just outside that glass to Obama's left, within his field of vision, stands the Washington Monument. He was in the view of and saying his vows to Osiris. Also, it was precisely 7:30 p.m. Why that time? It was the 1930 hour on a 24-hour clock, and 19.5 30 is half of 60, so you get the point 0.5, is a power number that is code for the other physics. Obama was performing a ritual having religious timing and meaning. All of these things are rituals for them, 100 years after the forced sinking of the Titanic. On April 14th of 2012, two ships went out from two different directions and did a ceremony over the Titanic with a pretext to pray with an E over those victims. I would contend to you that it was a ritual. Why were there two ships, and why position them at a specific distance apart? It was because the depth of the ocean floor completed their ritualistic triangle within the four corners of the world. It was because the depth of the ocean floor completed the ritualistic triangle within the four corners of the world, branding their triangle in a square over that massacre site. They often have these types of ceremonies to commemorate their events. Why do we have to hear about the Titanic over and over with every kind of movie, documentary, and television show? Over 40 productions now to remind us. It's an orgy of relishing in their success. That crime scene holds the greatest villainy that almost no one ever realized, and it's right in plain sight. They're laughing at you. They take pleasure at mocking you, who they see as too dumb to even realize what's being done in your face. You're just weak, helpless, and blurry eyed sheep, there to take whatever abuse they are in the mood to subject you to, and then be laughed at for it. With all that said, even now we have people caught in the media narrative that claims this president doesn't know what's going on. He's disconnected, and his advisors are all filling him full of bad advice. Well, some are. The saboteurs, some planted long ago, are still there to push their bad advice. But there are still many others in military intelligence who also have been diligently working on plans to wrest control from those desiring to be our masters. They are giving our president great advice. As an example, for the first time in over 100 years, we're bringing the power of money creation back under our own original constitutional authority. We are throwing off the shackles and shekels of their debate, uh, of their debt slavery, of their debt slavery. Slaves no more, and will never give it back. Along with the president, we are in the greatest fight of our lifetime. And all of you readers have to understand these things and decide to shoulder up with us and to be part of the answer as we overcome and overwhelm the oppression of these lecherous, self serving deviants. A lot of people are fussing right now about the various federal agencies and their officials are supposedly the entities really in charge of our country, and it's somehow not the president. Let me be kind. That is not the way it is. You haven't understood what has been happening during this presidency. Power has been consolidated all through these past 3+ years. The saboteurs and infiltrators are continuously being identified and eliminated or extracted. Our team is doing just fine. People have a wrong notion that these emergency management operations somehow give the deep state black hats control. Those who worry like this are listening to the wrong team. I don't want to hurt anyone over that misconception, but they need to just take a deep breath and realize they're listening to the beats of the wrong drummers. It's important for us to relax, take a deep breath, and think about all this rationally with executive authority and especially under these national emergency situations. The decision making command comes under the president's direct control, not some agency person. That said, there may be a bit of wrestling match that occurs at times. But who's ultimately going to win? It will be the president every time. As a future marker, let me briefly cover what is just ahead in our post-COVID world. Like changes set up at the 1945 Yalta Conference, US, UK, and the Soviet Union, to reorganize parts of the world in the aftermath of World War II. Today, we'll need another such gathering with the US dollar backed by oil energy. At this point in time, we have reclaimed oil production back to American soil. It's no longer controlled by foreign masters like Aramco, Arab American Oil Corporation, a Rockefeller operation with Rothschild banking, and involving our military protecting someone else's product and commerce. Energy production has been brought back here to the US, and we're going to continue to protect it. Moving forward, they can just go to hell. We will not be fighting their energy wars on foreign shores anymore. Even our currency is now backed under the US Treasury's control through what has been a methodical process that essentially nationalizes the Federal Reserve. Several years ago, back even before Trump was a candidate, I said this method would be the eventual strategy. So, what's coming will be like the post World War II period, in that we need another Yalta type conference. And I believe it will happen after the election in the later part of 2021. There will have to be some kind of a new understanding and updated balance in the world. And speaking of world politics and alliances, the Russian czars helped America against the British back at the time of President Lincoln and the Civil War. They've been our friends in the past because we're natural allies. That doesn't mean I'm dropping my guard with Putin. I haven't gone all soft and pinko. I'm just telling you that there are other world interests besides the US who also reject marching in the globalist parade. So I don't under that doesn't mean I'm dropping my guard with Putin. I haven't gone all soft and pinko. I'm just telling you that there are other world interests besides the US who also reject marching in the globalist parade. So I don't underestimate the resolve of patriots and people of goodwill in other nations around the world to join us on the right side of the battle. I think President T will do a great job of administering this needed new alignment, a fresh alliance that will change the way the world works. That reset is still out ahead of us. First, we have this mammoth battle to fight, which is the engagement for this current election. The globalists want their illegal voters to contribute fraudulent votes, just as they pull off election changing voter fraud with manipulation of mail in ballots. So we must stay diligent to prevent those. They will try everything they can to keep the economy suppressed for the absolute maximum time possible. They will hold back states like California and New York from coming back online. We will have to recognize that the fight is far from over. Even when we to even when we begin the restart of our nation. But first things first. The key right now is the 2020 presidential election. And let me just add one more aspect. Here's the thing. We've seen this struggle even in our nation's weather, having huge windstorms out across the East Coast and excessive rain in places, along with other extreme weather events in the Southwest. The reality is that some climate chaos is occurring now. Usually, physical occurrences tend to mimic what goes on in the spiritual realm. There is a history of that in the there is a history of that in the Bible when people moved away from God's will. What followed is generally some sort of calamity, like droughts or pestilence. In the biblical narrative, people usually looked at these as being judgments from God, of course. The scriptures also talk about how the rain falls on the righteous and unrighteous. But when sin prevails, the land, the nation, and the people all lose God's protection and blessing. We see the physical effects related to what's happening in the spiritual state of the nation. It does not serve the devil's purpose to make us do anything. The genius behind his evils is how he entices and cajoles us into doing wrong, whereby God's wrath is invoked against us. Now, having no legs or arms to control us, the serpent seeks to win by deceiving us into doing his lying will, as opposed to our Heavenly Father's will. Over the course of time, from Genesis to Lucians, the astute student, will note that the serpent, which was depicted crawling away from the garden in the dust, has evolved and aspires to become a dragon, such as is seen across Asia, which is merely a snake that has grown arms and legs. Those who do his bidding have now become his limbs to do his will. Throughout the art of the royal bloodlines around the world, we repeatedly see the same imagery of a snake or serpent. The serpent says, as an act of will, I am the dragon. During the CO video crisis, we as a nation have thrown open our doors and windows while the storm rages. We are cleaning out the garbage and debris, exorcising the verminous traders and their wretched stink. Shortly, we will begin washing the walls and sweeping the floors with high hopes to soon be enjoying the cleanliness of a demon free and windswept house. But what's going to occupy our clean house on the far side? After kicking out all these demons out, After kicking all these demons out and getting our country clean, starting to get it back on track, do we fill the house with godly things? Do we fill the house with the Spirit of God? Or, as the Bible says, once the demon is cast out and goes to dry places, he then comes back and sees the house he formerly lived in? It's swept, ornamented, clean, and with decorations. Does he then go out and get seven other demons worse than himself and come back and take control of the house again? Then making the fate of the man worse in his second condition than it ever was to begin with? After sweeping these monsters out, I would contend that as we people and our nation come out of this crisis with clean houses, hearts and minds, to then just return to business as usual means that we're wide open for something far worse than ever was there before President T and the Q team came along. They can help us to a certain point, but then it's up to the people to become what we're supposed to be. All the Kiru team and President T and the Kyuri team came along. They can help us to a certain point, but then it's up to the people to become what we're supposed to be. All the Kiru team and President T can do is their best effort. Then it's up to us to decide how we're going to take the country forward. And if we don't do it proactively, filling ourselves with godly things, these other demons are going to be back, at which point our problem returns, but much worse. These globalist monsters are going to be back with a passion. God willing, after a second administration by President T, we're going to be faced with a big question. What's next? Will there be people of substance able and willing to take the helm after this administration is gone? Who will take the baton? You see, part of the whole thing that people don't understand with the Kyuru operation is that the core of it is to train a new generation to grow and mature into power. The Kyuru project was aimed at gamers, younger people with inquiring minds and the skill sets to educate themselves. Just like a gamer has to go through a new game to find out how to play it, what tricks there are, and how to advance past certain obstacles, They have to learn and try different techniques until they overcome a set of challenges to get to the next level. When their skill sets a match of the present stage they are at, a gamer can progress to the next one. People have to educate themselves, and then new people must come into the Kiru project who'll educate themselves. I understand there are a bunch of people out there that don't believe the Kiryu operation is real, but it is. The level of sophistication is at the outer edge of the current supercomputer's capabilities envelope. Artificial intelligence is involved in helping to correlate all of the Kiryu posts down to the second, controlling the information so that it overlays and layers perfectly with the thousands of posts to date. The real goal of the Kiryu operation is not to find out who Kiryu is or who the Kiryu team is. That is missing the point. At the end of today's battle, the goal is that you become of a mind that you are the Q team. That you're a member of the Q team. All those people who participated, learned, and were educated at Q University are graduates. They are PhDs in the Great War to free mankind from these banker monsters who kill presidents, take over economies, and bleed us off like vampires. Your labor, work, and sweat have been going to them. Your land has been stolen away through banker frauds and scams. Your sons have been sent to war on foreign soil, many sent home in parts and pieces. The idea is that you must choose to graduate and become a Q team member. That's how we'll know if the Q operation has actually been successful. People must understand it's not about an individual, a guru, one single person, or even a family. It's not. Which of T's kids or some other elite family's child is going to become the next president? If you're looking for that, you're misunderstanding. We are done with monastic reigns. We all have to take on that responsibility. We all need to understand where each that kid by the side of the road who grew up in the shadow of these events when our nation was stolen from us. If we can see it that way, we'll know we've won. It will be a very sad day if all we have out of this current turmoil is a bunch of sheep bleeding and looking around for the new shepherd or master who's going to lead us out of this. If that's what we do, then we have failed and we're doomed. We must each grow up, rise to the occasion, and become leaders ourselves, each ready to take a position at the helm. It's the only way we survive. But if people remain ignorant, looking for somebody to lead us out of the next tragedy, someone to be our leader and make all the decisions for us and protect us, then you're an absolute effing a-hole and an idiot. And if you're promoting that, you're not helping. Nobody's promoting someone coming in to be the next savior for America. That's BS. The people of America are the savior of America. Every man is a sovereign in his own home, taking on the identity as Q, with every person wearing a Q hat. We're a visage of some sort that unifies us together as being on the same team, having the same ideas. It's not a certain individual or a family we need. If you're looking for that, you're doing a disservice to the whole American project. It's about all of us understanding who we are together, what things affected us, created us, and made us have to be in this fight together. About the Civil War, President Lincoln said this: "We haven't asked for it nor desired it. The war is thrust upon us, but we will not shrink from our duty or our responsibility. We are in a holy war for our country, for our land, for our people, and for our families. We are all that kid by the side of the road." This has been a reading of Kid by the Side of the Road by SAVIN, to be continued very shortly after a short intermission. Stay tuned.